what it triggered and what it shifted was when it's my turn to die, what am I really going to regret not having done? And boom, there was the dream. It had been in my back pocket for the better part of 40 years. Like, it was there, but that wasn't where my focus was. Suddenly, it slipped out of my pocket and it was right in my face.
Today's episode is with Leah Fisher, and we had such a great time in this. In fact, after the fact, she said that she really enjoyed our conversation. And at first, she had to learn the dance, but once she learned the dance of our conversation, she had a really great time. So I hope that you can hear that within this episode. I think you'll be able to. But Leah is a retired psychotherapist who really kept dreaming on a dream that she put in her back pocket for so many years. So she took this dream beyond the conventional way that I think so many of us would do. And she took a life-changing solo marriage sabbatical in her 60s. Her journey is really this, I don't know, testament to the power of being bold and audacious and having the courage to pursue these long-held dreams, no matter where you are in your life. In this episode, she shares this story of embracing the unknown from her, dare I say, transformative experiences in the Amazon jungle to these heartfelt encounters around the world during her sabbatical. This really is just an episode about self-discovery and the healing power of storytelling and redefining what it means to live a fulfilling life. So I hope you enjoy this conversation with Leah Fisher. Without further ado, here is that conversation.
I'm Matt Gilhooly, and this is The Life Shift. Candid conversations about the pivotal moments that have changed lives forever.
Hello, my friends. Welcome to the Life Shift podcast. I am here with Leah. Hello, Leah.
Hi.
Thank you for joining. Thank you for wanting to be a part of the Life Shift podcast, first of all.
I am indeed happy to participate.
Well, we were talking a little bit before recording, and I really hope that this show is something that people look at as like these conversations that they wish people were having, these like real conversations with real questions that maybe we shy away from asking or sharing these particular stories. So it's just been such a journey. I think I've talked to like 165 people now in this little journey that started out as a school assignment during the pandemic. I got a second master's degree and I took a podcasting class, and I had to start, well, I didn't have to start a podcast. I just had to do 2 episodes, and I did. And the Life Shift podcast was born in that class. And the show really stems from my own personal experience. When I was 8, my mom was killed in a motorcycle accident. And that day, I was visiting my dad, my dad lived in Georgia, my mom lived in Massachusetts. And on that day, I walked into my dad's office and he sat me down and he had to tell me that my mom had died in the accident. And at that moment in time, everything that was ever going to exist in my life changed, right? I lived with my mom full time. I was just visiting my dad who lived in a different state. So everything, my school changed, my parent essentially changed. The way that I was growing up was going to change. And this was late 80s, early 90s. And at that time, people weren't really talking about therapy or grief or those kind of things, and especially for a kid, or at least in the world that I lived in, people weren't doing that. And so growing up, I just felt, do other people have these like line in the sand moments in which life is just so different after that moment? And so I've had this opportunity to talk to so many people about many life shifts, and my naivety or my naivete at the beginning that maybe we only have one big life shift. It's not true. We have a lot of them, and we have a lot of different shifts in our lives that have brought us here. And so I'm just so honored that people like yourself and, basically strangers across the world, I've had this opportunity to learn and grow and heal from. So that's a little bit about where the show comes from for anyone that's listening for the first time, and for you, Leah. So thank you for being on this journey.
It's quite a painful way to discover an incredible gift that you can share with people.
It is. And, this was 35 years ago or so. And I look back at it now and look at all the things that I have done and learned because of such a tragic moment in my life. And it's so weird to look back with like a gratefulness of the things that have happened because of it. Not grateful for the moment, but grateful for the journey that I went on afterwards. And I think that takes a lot to be able to reflect on that. And like it took me a long time to get here, but like it takes a lot to be able to look back and go, well, here are the good things that came from such a tragic experience. And I'm sure you probably have experienced things like that in your life where you're like, that really sucked, but look what I've done with it. Is that true?
Yes, at the best of times.
At the best of times. Well, fair,
Yes,
fair.
yes.
Well, I think it's just a wonderful opportunity. And here's a little disclosure for you. And I don't know if you know this. Most of my listeners know this, but I don't do a lot of research about my guests. All I know is the intake. I know you have a book. We're going to talk a little bit about your book, but I didn't read any of it because I truly want these conversations to unfold in the way that I think the universe wanted them to. And I want to discover those things for the first time when you tell them.
That's great, Matt. I happen to be someone who loves surprises. So let's surprise each other.
I'm here for it. So before we get into your detailed story, maybe you can tell us a little bit about who you are today in today's world.
Okay, who I am today is a retired psychotherapist who sat in a chair having intimate and rather loving conversations with a lot of people, with individuals and with couples for about 35 years.
Wow.
Yes. And I closed down my practice in order to take the 1 year solo sabbatical, which is what my book is about. And it was not only a sabbatical from my career, it was a sabbatical from my husband. Not because I had a, not because I had a desire or a reason to be away from him for a year, but because I wanted something so much and he didn't share that desire, at least not at that time, that the two of us talked until we agreed that he would do what he wanted and I would do what I wanted, and we'd visit back and forth. And so that was the year of exploring the world on my own.
That is probably something that a lot of people probably wish they could. You also just kind of gave away the secret right here at the beginning, which is, it just happens that way. But I love that. First of all, 35 years of doing what you did. How does that, before we get into your story, how does that affect you as a human? And how, like, do you absorb those things? Do you bring them home with you? Did you find a way to leave them there? Like, I can imagine the things that you heard and how you had to process. Like, how do you as a human function through 35 years of that?
That's a great question, and a lot of people ask me. And the bottom line is that I'm a caring and a compassionate person, but my role in the therapeutic relationship is certainly a heart connection, but it's also helping to figure something out, helping patients to see what they have seen and experienced, and also what options they might not have thought of, to have thoughts about where something came from, but perhaps there's something additional. And so it's a combination of loving and problem solving. And I'm able to do both in the session. I guess I don't carry it home and suffer it
That's
because
good.
I have a task. And I think many therapists, if they thought hard about it, would realize that it's not just pulling at your heartstrings. You care, you feel compassionate, and I have a job to do, which is to help them explore the experiences that have had such an impact on their lives.
And that makes sense. I think, I very loosely relate it to some of the conversations that I have on this podcast in which I'm holding a space. I'm not trying to solve anything. I'm just holding a space for a deeply personal story, whether that's about
Yes.
a death or a suicide or like a diagnosis or whatever it is. And I'm holding this space. And I, through my journey in this podcast, have had to find ways where I don't take that out of the conversation as well. And And, because having some empathy, you kind of naturally absorb some of it, and you have to find a way to protect your own self too. So that's super curious of 35 years of it. If you didn't have a practice, you'd probably be really, really full of a lot of things.
I guess. It's funny because without my being aware of it, it shows if I'm on an airplane talking to a stranger in the next seat, they'll ask me if I'm a teacher or a therapist. And it's like, whatever made, yes. And what made you think of it? He said, you know, you think like it, you talk like it. So
And you
anyway, it,
listen.
sometimes, mostly. So,
I think that's
yes.
important. I think it's great, and thank you for the work that you have done for that many years for all the people out there that needed it, because I think that's such a big job and such a hard job. And so just thank you before we jump into your story. It's so impactful, and really honestly, that's what helped me, what I say, and people yell at me for saying this, but close the door on grief about my mom. I finally in my early 30s found a therapist that was the right fit. Took like 5 or 6 to find the right person that kind of jived with me. And she said just a sentence to me that like snapped everything, and was like, she's like, you realize that every decision that you've made since your mom died was out of fear as that 8-year-old. And I was like, like my whole world like exploded at that moment. But it was like people like yourself in these roles can say, like we said earlier, one sentence that just could have heard it 1,000 times before that, but at that moment was said the right way. So again, thank you for your service. So you gave us a little bit of a sneak peek of what your kind of life shifting year, if you will, but maybe you can even break it down a little bit more, kind of paint the picture of what your life was like leading up to when you decided to make this moment. And then maybe if you can identify like the specific piece that you feel really significantly shifted things from the old Leah to the new Leah.
Well, I'd like to flash all the way back to being 22 because I think that's where this was born. So I was a very well behaved, obedient, respecting authority young person, did what was expected. And as you can guess, a bit of a late bloomer. When I graduated from college, I really wanted to join the Peace Corps. This was in the late 60s, and the Peace Corps was just being birthed, and it was a very exciting thing to do. It was certainly not the expected next step after college. And so I ended up going to graduate school and forever after regretted having given up this chance to live in other cultures and give back and find ways to give back. So that wish,
You just like planted a seed way back when.
it was a squandered opportunity. I didn't quite have the sense of ownership of my own self to feel like I could decide what I really wanted to do next.
Were you just following a path?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Because I talk about that too. Like, and I think mine is informed, like perfectionist. Like, I just did whatever society told me was next. Like, I had to do well and then go to college and then get a good job. Like it was like society's checklist for me, is what I call it.
Yes.
Were you doing something similar?
I was love informed, which is to say that I adored my father in particular, and I did what he thought was a good idea.
So that you could win his love or keep his love.
That was an expectation in the family. Let dad be the top dog. He's a really smart guy. He knows just what to do. And don't you dare have a different opinion. And I was very obedient.
Makes sense. I think that's how we grow up. And I did the same thing. I was like, but mine was out of fear of abandonment. Cause I was like, if my dad doesn't love what I just did, then he's also going to leave because my mom left,
Oh,
you know?
yep.
So that's why I always ask that question, because I'm like, how do we get on this path where we just follow things when your dream was probably so huge to go into the Peace Corps, and then you're just like, this is the expected route. I should go that way.
Yep. Well, a lot of mistakes from when I was younger, I've been able to just lay to rest. That one wouldn't
That one.
go away. I was mad at myself. It's like, you wanted this so much. How was it you were able to talk yourself out of it?
Could you not do it afterwards? Like, was it that one and only chance and then it was, like, never an opportunity for you?
Not until I was 60.
Okay.
Okay? I promise I won't get too far ahead of myself. Okay. I went to graduate school. I ended up becoming a therapist. There was, you know, it was socially useful, but that bit of following my bliss never got to happen. And so pretty soon there's dating, falling in love, getting married, a mortgage, 2 children, save for college tuition. And then there was a moment. Both kids had graduated from college. They were both self supporting. I'd been married for 30 years. It was a nice, sturdy marriage. Blissful marriages aren't as many as people might pretend or wish for, but a good, solid, sturdy marriage.
That's a long time.
And it is a long time. And then something happened that brought that dream back to life.
Well, first of all, I mean, 30 years, I appreciate you saying that a blissful marriage is, like, probably not the reality for most people. I mean, we're humans, right? Like, you have to exist with another human that for
That's
that long, like,
imperfect.
right,
Yes.
and I'm also imperfect and too so,
Well,
like,
then we've got to stop talking in that case.
listen, I thought I wanted to be perfect for so many years, and it just hurt me more than it helped me. So, I think that I finally learned that like an A plus is not always attainable, and that's okay.
Yep.
So
Yep.
you give your marriage like a B plus. Is that what we're saying for those 30 years?
I'm not gonna grade it, you do what you want.
So what happened to kind of shift you back into that bliss seeking?
Well, 2 things happened, and the first and probably the most important one, my father died. This much revered, super smart father died, and it dawned on me that if my father could die, I guess I would too. There's a Buddhist teacher who says, "We all know we're gonna die, we just don't believe it." I started to believe it.
Really?
Yeah,
Because this
and
wasn't the first person that had died in your circle, right? Like,
it
but
was the first daddy who had died,
yeah,
and it really packed a punch. So, what it triggered and what it shifted was, when it's my turn to die, what am I really gonna regret not having done? And boom, there was the dream. It had been in my back pocket for the better part of 40 years. Like, it was there, but that wasn't where my focus was. Suddenly, it slipped out of my pocket, and it was right in my face.
and that's dangerous. It can be dangerous, right? Because it makes you rethink everything, does it? Does it go like, does it make you have regrets? Or does it? I would
Oh, no,
imagine it would.
that had been happening all along. If I would bump into people talking about the Peace Corps, my gut would clench with, I would say, remorse, but it was also shame. What an idiot you were. And look at the experience they had. This is sort of random, but I went with my husband back to his college reunion, and we were surrounded by a bunch of his classmates, and they were talking about the Peace Corps. And I oozled up to them and said, "You know, I applied. I filled out that application to go to the Peace Corps, but I didn't get in." And they said, "Why didn't you get in?" And I said, "I was scared to mail in the application." And they said, "Well, we guys had a good incentive to hand in ours. The alternative was going to Vietnam." And it was like, oh my God, most all of the people that I envied who'd gone to the Peace Corps had been guys, graduating seniors, and a lot of them did social service exemptions. Peace Corps was one.
That's smart. It's interesting though, because then you also get that like Was there jealousy that came with that too? I know you said shame and those kind of things, but did you have any jealousy?
More yearning. It wasn't
Okay.
like, "I wish it had been me instead of you." It was like, "Oh, there it was for the taking, and I didn't take it." That experience, though, of the guys reminding me about getting drafted softened the self-blame. It didn't soften the yearning, but it softened the self-blame. So my dad dying was the first shift, if that's the right word. The second one came a couple of years later in the Amazon jungle.
What were you doing
I
there?
I promised to make this interesting. I went to the Amazon in Ecuador with my husband, with a group of people from an environmental organization who wanted to take North Americans to the jungle, to the lungs of the planet, and help them understand what these indigenous cultures know down to their bones, which is nature is alive and it needs to be respected and almost worshiped and protected. And these tribes that are way, way far out in the rainforest think of themselves as the custodians of the rainforest. And boy, they're working hard as custodians because petroleum industry is pushing further and further into the jungle.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's so foreign for us to like, I mean, that just seems like you go there, it seems so exotic until you realize the power that I bet that you saw in those people
Oh,
and the
yes.
yeah.
So that's how I got to the jungle. What
That's how you got
happened
there.
That's how I got there. The dramatic shift happened when I participated in an ayahuasca ceremony.
That's a the brave decision just to begin with. Was that something you were interested in or
You know, it was there we had that opportunity, and I am a curious person. It's like, "Well, I haven't done that before. Sure, I'll do it." It turned out that it was quite an intense experience. Just at a body level, I've never thrown up as hard for as long as I did on ayahuasca. Many people had visions. My husband had an amazing vision of he said the stars of the northern hemisphere were embracing the stars of the southern hemisphere.
wow. Hey.
So, that was deep. The young people who were with us had their visions and were down in about an hour and a half. 14 hours later, I was still face down on a banana leaf.
Oh my god. Wow.
Yes, but my experience, while it wasn't a vision, was this ayahuasca is also called the vine of death. So here's the second death. I had the feeling of being cemented to the ground, and yet my mind was alive and active and doing its own thing. I could not move my body. Wasn't like paralysis, it was just so heavy from whatever was in those 2 plants that mixed together to make ayahuasca, and I found myself wondering if that is what it felt like for my father to have been at the end of his life. His body clearly wasn't doing anything, but he had always been such a thinker. I wondered if, like I was in that moment, knowing that this was a ceremony that would end and I'd go back to being me, my body was completely still and my mind was busy noticing it. Thanks to drugs I had taken in my earlier years, I was a kid of the 60s. I knew I wasn't dying,
Yeah.
but I just wondered, is this what dying would feel like? So the outcome of that was I had a conversation at that point with my husband. I'd been hinting and we'd been skirting around this issue of my traveling for a number of years. I don't rush my husband into anything, it doesn't work. But we sat down and I asked him, I said this had been something I've really wanted to do since I was 22. And would he be willing to take a year and take a sabbatical with me? And his response is, no, I want to keep working. And I said, I can be sort of sassy and flippant in case you hadn't figured
I
it
couldn't
out
get
yet.
that. No, not at
Right.
all.
And I said, well, how about if you keep working and I go travel the world? And he has a tone of voice that I call the case is closed voice. And he said, I wouldn't like that at all.
Mm,
Now, in decades younger, I would have tried to convince him it was a great idea or called him whatever. I just sat there. I just sat there. And then he said, but I'd really like to make your dream come true.
oh, wow.
And I said, well, I can live with that. So believe me, we had many more discussions and lot of planning. And ultimately, we agreed that I would travel on my own for a year. Now, it didn't mean I wouldn't see him for a year. What we arranged is I'd go 4 months at a time, 3 times. I'd come home in between the first and second and the second and third segments, a little bit like being on the quarter system, okay? No finals. And I would visit my children, visit an aging mom who had dementia, remind my husband he was happily married, and then go off for another 4 months. So that was how it happened. And he came and he visited me wherever I happened to be for 2 weeks during each of those sections of travel. So that
That
was
seems like a reasonable deal.
my father dying, and the ayahuasca created the shift. And where it took me to was a year of traveling on my own, really seeing what was out there and what I could do as a retired therapist that could be useful.
So you did some work in some way.
I did work in some way, but what was gorgeous is no appointments, no office, no sitting in a chair, and just being open to opportunities that presented themselves. Would you like to hear about a couple of those
Tell me. Yeah, for
opportunities?
sure. Yeah.
Okay. Well, there are three that come to mind. One was before I left, a place I had visited in Guatemala in my 20s had had a huge mudslide. This was a lake called Lake Atitlan, surrounded by volcanoes, just gorgeous. One of the volcanoes in a huge rainstorm had just collapsed and
Mm.
buried an entire village.
Oh, wow.
And the survivors were living in these Save the Children Red Cross shelters, basically tarps. And I had heard that the children were just traumatized. So, thanks to a psychoanalyst here in San Francisco who had developed workbooks for children after Hurricane Katrina, they were sort of like trauma reduction workbooks
Okay.
that were filled out in conversation with a parent or a teacher. I asked him if I could take this model and translate it into Spanish for these kids in Guatemala. I didn't tell him I'd have to learn how to speak Spanish before I could do it, but he said yes. So, what I did during my 4 months there is I learned to speak Spanish. I got help to do this translation. It had included a coloring book where the children would color in drawings of before the disaster, during the disaster, parents and children being separated, reunited, and then building the community back up again. So that was my project there.
I mean, that's just like a big project in itself. I'm thinking here you are, you're going on a sabbatical of like travel, like, but this is like meaningful, like heart filling, soul filling work that you're doing. This is your 22-year-old self doing your Peace Corps work, right?
It's my 22-year-old self armed with the skills of my 62-year-old self, able to do the Peace Corps in a very different way. Different because I was the boss, because it was 1 year rather than 2, and I really had a skill set that I just wanted to know how useful in the big world is what I've been doing for 35 years sitting in a chair. And this was my first discovery that it could be really useful.
And I mean, I would imagine that like that. Well, first of all, how did you choose where you were going? Was it based on the fact that there was a mudslide and then you chose to go to Guatemala, or were you just like planning?
I wasn't planning. I had been to this lake and adored it. I had been to the lake as a guest of a college classmate who had gone into the Peace Corps. And so I spent a month living with him and his girlfriend. And I loved this place. I loved the people who lived there. I loved the life that my friend was living on that lake, speaking Spanish and playing with kids and whatever. So it was a blending of who I had become and who I had once been, and it was delicious.
I bet. I don't think there's a I don't think there's a lot of people that can relate to something that they were so wanting to do for so long, but then had the opportunity to also learn something and do something for so long and then blend them
Yes.
together. It just always feels like, oh, I was 8 and I wish I had done this. And then you just never do it. Or you do it and it's just like a check mark and not a blending of like life experiences with that. I mean, because that moment was probably so much richer by doing it in your 60s than had you gone to the Peace Corps and like done something. It just feels like there's so many layers to something like that.
Well, this was a wonderful thing. I corresponded with another college friend who had gone to the Peace Corps in India, and I told him what I was doing, and he wrote back and he said, "Wow, what you are doing is so much more like the Peace Corps than that what I so much more like what I thought I would do in the Peace Corps than what I actually got to do."
Yeah, what did they do? Like someone that went to that space, what would they have done? Would it just be more like service work and not so deeply connected to the community?
Well, it might be teaching English, which it seems like it's helpful all over the world since for the time being, English is an international language. Some of them were put in communities where they were being asked to offer their expertise to people who might not be using the best farming techniques or whatever, but they were experts in doing it their way. And these 22-year-old consultants didn't know what the heck they were doing, which is a horrible feeling.
Yeah. Well, I think that's what most college graduates feel like when they go into the workforce. They're like, well, I learned all this stuff in this book. Guess what? Life is not like that.
Imagine what it's like the first 6 months are called a therapist and you sit down with real people who really need something from you.
I think
Yes.
yeah, that's a much deeper connection that is required. But I mean, I just think of like, I went to business school the first time. And I just think of these like my friends that did like accounting or something, and you learn what's in the textbook for accounting, and then you get into a real accounting job, and you're like, that's not that's not what we do. Like that's just like what you think we do, but that's not
Yes.
actually how the real world works. But yeah, I would imagine being a therapist is much more daunting at first.
Yes.
Does it ever not get daunting, or does it ever feel comfortable?
You know, what I think is it takes about 7 years to get comfortable in your skin, and I've heard teachers say it's about 7 years before you become a really good teacher.
That makes sense. Well, I mean, I think that's awesome that you did the I mean, you said that there were multiple things, but the Guatemala thing is just I think about that 22-year-old. Had you made that decision to turn in your application, get accepted and go, all the other things that wouldn't have happened in your life because of going to that. So it's like almost, like we could play that game.
Yes, I'd love to play that game, but they only give you 1 life.
I know. But you think about that, and the reason I say that is because the route you did take perhaps made this part of the journey that much richer, that much more beautiful, or as you said, delicious. Do you think that? Do you think that's true?
I know it was delicious. I think it was also healing. You know, it didn't it didn't make me tall and blonde and a ballerina, but it made me feel much more kindly toward myself and the path I'd taken in my life.
How so?
If I had been the if I at 22 had known what I know as a 60-year-old, I jolly well would have mailed in that application.
Well, yeah.
Okay, and the friends I knew who went to the Peace Corps came back with a much more worldly sense, with a much bigger sense of the world, with, more courage and more confidence, and I could have used that. So I stayed a late bloomer maybe longer than I would have liked, but the point is that shift, I got there. I got to where I wanted to be, and part of what made it exciting at 60 was that I thought it was too late. I thought I had permanently forfeited this opportunity. How many 60-year-olds go traveling around the world by themselves?
How many go to the jungle and do an ayahuasca thing?
We got brought there by very caring. We had a guide. Once I got on the plane, I had nothing except a destination to
Yeah,
start, you know?
good. No,
Yeah,
I mean, I think there's something to be said about making those choices though too, because you very well could have just kept going with, this checklist kind of journey that you were on. Not to say that you didn't enjoy it, but
exactly.
like you could have just listened to your husband when he had his case closed voice, like, and
Yes.
or you could have been sassy instead of being quiet, because I bet that quiet part made him think, wait a second, she like really needs this.
It certainly gave him space to think,
Yeah.
you know? Yep.
Instead of like a back and forth, I think I think that's beautiful that you did that. I love that. What other experience? You said you had three, but what
I
other
do have
experience?
3. Well, the next one was in Java. I was in Java just for a few days. This was one of the places where my husband met me, and it was we'd been there for 2 or 3 days. It was our last night before we were gonna fly to Bali, and we were in an earthquake
Oh
that
no.
lasted for 59 seconds. I know you don't live on the West Coast, but 59 seconds is a very long time to have shaking get stronger and stronger and stronger, to not be quite sure what the building you're in is made out of, and to think there's a real good chance you're gonna die. Because we'd only been there a couple of days, I'm thinking during these 59 seconds, "Boy, that's lasting a long time. Boy, that's lasting a long time. Oh my god, I think I'm gonna die, and where the blank am I?" So, 6,000 people died. We
Wow.
were we were quite close to the epicenter. I got an email from my daughter saying, "Mom, are you okay?" And I said, "Yes, a lot of people died, but I'm okay." And she said, "Well, good, I know you were looking for a service project."
Well, she knew you.
Exactly. So, I ended up joining a Red Cross disaster mental health group and putting together another workbook and getting another artist to make a coloring book.
Right place, right time. I mean,
Right?
unfortunate time, but
Exactly.
it's
Exactly.
it's I mean, I feel like the universe was like serving this experience to you on like a silver platter because it realized how long you had been yearning for that kind of experience.
Yes.
Yeah, how was that?
Well, when I safely got home to San Francisco, I thought, "Oh, here I am on the San Andreas Fault, safe at last."
Because it was familiar, right? Like
That's
if
right.
you had an earthquake there, at least you know like where you are, where the F you are, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. No, that's I mean, it's just I don't know. I'm still like and maybe I'm in my 40s now, so maybe in my 60s I'm going to choose to do something that I chose not to do in my 20s because of your story.
That would be wonderful.
Or maybe I'll do it in my 40s.
How about right now?
Exactly. Oh, bye.
What's in your back pocket? So, well, yes, in telling the story in my book, my I have several goals, and I didn't start out with those goals. They kind of came out of the writing. And one is that being over 50 or 60 doesn't mean the game is over. It means you need to use your imagination to have a little bit of audacity, or
Mm,
a lot, and
a lot.
to a
Do you
lot
find it's harder to be audacious as you get older or easier? Okay.
easier,
Because you don't care?
way easier. I did something in my 50s that my daughter thought was just ridiculous. Some bag I was carrying to put Post-its in so that I didn't forget things. And she said, "You can't do that." And I said, "Hey, I'm 60. I can do whatever I damn please." So no, I think it's a lot easier in an environment of safety. If you're in a war zone, no way, you know, but under happy and fortunate circumstances, you bet.
Thinking before we go into your book, thinking back to when your father died and you were talking about like how you realized like, oh, like this could happen to me too. Like I could die. Did you feel or did you know if he had regrets when he died? Did he have things that he just didn't achieve or do because life that like kind of signaled that maybe you should start to do those things?
He wasn't a big talker, but I know him well enough that I think he was a little sorry he hadn't won a Nobel Prize. And
Small goal.
so, yes,
What did he do?
he was a biochemist and a ophthalmo and an eye surgeon,
That makes more sense.
and he did some very impressive things. Didn't get a Nobel Prize, and one of the real gems of that time traveling, there was a part of me that thought, "Hey, if you're a good daughter, you go get a Nobel Prize, and then you can go out and play." I discovered there's so many small ways as a traveler that you can contribute, that they don't have to be Nobel Prize worthy, that you can be helpful in small ways and in very non-professional settings. So I wanted to tell you the third situation where I got to use what I had learned as a therapist. So I'm in Bali on my own, snorkeling in the ocean. There is a woman, an English-speaking woman, who's out there in the water too, and everyone had been curious about her because a young Balinese man, this woman was probably in her 50s, this very young, very gorgeous Balinese man would drive his motorcycle up to her cottage each evening, and it was like, "Hey, what's going on?" So, we're standing waist deep in this water, trying not to step on coral, and she tells me her story, and her story was of she had been involved romantically with this young man, and she discovered that he had had a baby with a young Balinese woman, and she was devastated, and she was furious, and she really didn't know what to do with her wrath. And I thought about a couple I had known in college, and I asked if I could tell her a story. And the story was of a minister and his wife, and he had an affair, and the woman got pregnant, and he had to come and inform his wife. These were two of the most godlike people I have ever met. And she said, "If that's your child, then they are family." And to this day, the mother and her child are part of Thanksgivings and Christmas, and they have, half brothers and sisters, and that child has never felt anything except loved and included. So I tell the story, and her eyes get big, and she says, "Boy, I'd like to do something like that." And I said, "Well, you're still really angry. You can't hurry these things." And she said, "No, I've been angry a really long time. Did I tell you they named the baby after me. The baby has my name.
Oh
She
my.
said, "This is a remarkable young man. He has enough room in his heart to love many people." Then she went off towards her coral reef, and I went off toward mine. Never know what she did with that story, and it's not my business, you know?
Yeah.
A therapist, you interact, you share what you have, and what comes of it's not your business. So, anyway, that was I love that image that I was able to be useful with therapy skills in the sea.
In the sea, in a
Yes,
beautiful spot. Yeah. No, I think it also just tells me the power of story, whether she did the exact same thing, whether it made her think differently, whether, I mean, it obviously affected her in some way of hearing that story, and the power that you have to be able to recall that story or to bring that story to connect those particular things is so special. But I mean, I love that.
and you've made story what you do for your listeners and
I
for your
try.
guests. Yeah, yeah,
I think it's important, and I think of the younger version of myself, and I think of when I have these conversations, what did he need to hear? Because he needed so much that he didn't get because my dad was in his mid 30s. He was suddenly as an only parent of, a child he was going to see every holiday, kind of thing. And he wasn't prepared. He didn't know how to grieve. His mom didn't know how to grieve because she was a child of the 30s, and that just isn't what she did. They didn't learn that stuff.
right.
And I think about that 8-year-old or the 10-year-old version of me or the 15-year-old version of me. Had I heard a conversation about a 40-year-old guy who had his mom died when he was a kid, and these are all the things that he was able to accomplish, like, what if I had heard that as a younger kid? Would I have felt more confident in certain things? Would I have taken more risks? Would I have dropped the fear of abandonment? Like all those things. And so when I have these conversations, yes, it's about like talking about real things and real emotions, and that's why like I ask you like, did you feel jealous, of those moments, or did whatever these things are, because I think I did. Like I would go to people's houses and I see their mom and their dad interacting. My parents were divorced. So first of all, I had that. But then I didn't have a mom, so I would be watching these people interact with their mom and be like jealous. And so
Yes.
having these emotions is important, and having these conversations is important, and I love that you're able to do it.
Well, I'll tell you what you're bringing to mind for me is that for all of us, whether we're traumatized in specific ways or not, we still take our 3-year-olds inside us. And in certain circumstances, scary times, very sad times, that 3-year-old or 8-year-old or whatever pops up, whereas most of the time it's just kind of quiet. My fears of, well, they were fears of being alone and of alone being a dangerous situation. So for me, traveling alone and making it work was really it's like having a conversation with that 3-year-old saying, "The monster in the closet that you've been afraid of all that time isn't all that scary."
You know, that's funny that you say it in that way, is because that's how I feel about like things that I worry about. In my head, they're so scary. And then as soon as I say them out loud, I'm like, what? That's like nothing. Like, or I write it down and I'm like, why was I? This sounds like nothing. So it's kind of in the same way of like where people bottle things up and they don't let it out. And as soon as they let it out, it's like, oh, and it's really not that bad. I can do something with this and move forward with it. So
Yes.
I love that connection. What made you start writing your book though? Like, why write a book?
I wrote a book because it was the second most exciting thing I had done in my life. Maybe 3. Going to summer camp, leaving my parents for the very first time and going away to where kids all got to sleep in a cabin together and you learn how to swim and paddle a canoe, and then you go off for 5 days on a camping trip. That was beautiful. Having babies was fabulous, and this trip was up there as part of the top 3 most exciting things.
Well, it's because you were connecting your 22-year-old self too with the rest of your life. I love that.
Yep. I also had the good fortune that a woman who my husband knew who was a poet, when she heard about the trip, she said, "Take a journal and journal about it and pay attention to details, write down details." So, in a way, I came home with material for a book, but it was another 15 years before I put it between covers.
Yeah. What was that journey like? Was it overwhelming? Was it fun? Was it all the things?
What I needed in order to finish it was for my husband and me to grow more. The book needed a really happy ending, and we kept sliding back into our old habit of him working too much and my being lonely and bicker and whatever, which wasn't a very good ending to the book. So, over I spent 2 years talking weekly with a therapist who was also a devoted Buddhist, and I went to her because more about the Buddhism than about the therapy. And what I think I learned in those 2 years is that a good enough marriage is a good marriage. So I kind of made my peace that I had chosen not just well enough, but I'd chosen well. And, when you start treating your partner like you chose them wisely, it's amazing how much more they wanna show up for dinner, and then you wanna treat them even more nicely because they showed up for dinner. So that spiral
Mm.
grew.
That's a powerful thought. That's really hard to like digest in one little. So, you know how we were talking about like the weirdest little pieces of people's stories stick with you? That one
Mhm.
right there, like shine in my face. I think that's true of like friendships too. I think that's true of like any kind of relationship as well. Would you agree?
Yes.
That you choose, like, I think for many of us, and I don't know why, but we absorb like what a marriage should be or what a friendship should be, and then we like have these standards that are never met, and then we're mad about it, and then then you spiral in that way. But
Yep.
I love that nugget that you just dropped on us for us to think about it
But what
differently.
was the key that opened the door was really coming to believe that a good enough marriage is a good marriage, because what it did is it erased my sense of what an idiot I was. That's the same as the for not sending in that application to the Peace Corps. What an idiot I was to choose this person. Well, even if you never say it out loud, your tone of voice communicates it. And, you know, the part that took it one step further was actually COVID.
Because you were forced to be together so much.
Exactly. And I kept it a secret for a long time because how can you say good things came out of pandemic that slaughtered
Yeah,
millions
millions of
of
people.
people? But our governor, Gavin Newsom, required people to work from home. And my husband had just finished telling me in that case's closed voice that there was no way he could do psychoanalysis remotely and no way Jose. 2 days later, he had to. Well, first of all, it worked out fine professionally. There are patients who still prefer to have treatment by Zoom. But he discovered that he lived in a beautiful home and he had a really nice wife, and she cooked very good dinners. And we have dinner together every night. And in my book, when I'm acknowledging thank you to, I have a thank you to Governor Gavin Newsom.
For his lockdown. Yeah.
Yes, which,
Meanwhile, in Florida, we were locked down for like 8 minutes, I think, maybe.
yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's important. I think that's a good message for people to understand too. And I mean, you have to come to it when you're ready to come to it. Had you had that conversation maybe 10 years earlier, it might not have
Mhm.
resonated in the same way. So, I mean, I think our experiences fill that.
You're really wise in saying that. And I think one of the things that my story does is it lets people who are younger know that there's no statute of limitation on growing and on growing as partners. And I learned it by doing it, but it feels very good to share that news with younger people.
Well, and I think another part of your story is the sabbatical that you chose to take when people maybe wouldn't do it in the way that you did it, or like maybe traditionally you didn't see people do that. They
Mhm.
retired and they went on a retiring trip, like it's a retirement trip of some sort, but not in the way that you did it. You did it in a service. You did it in a service, one, to yourself
Uh-huh.
and what you needed, but you did it in service of all the people that you encountered in that space. And I think that is a really nice message. I think we probably like what you thought about when your father passed is like, oh, wait, like I need to do some stuff before this is
Yes.
over kind of thing.
Yes.
And we kind of look at like, oh, well, we're old. Now we can't do anything. It's not true. It's just, kind of I don't know how to say that without it sounding insulting.
Well, it's pretty daring for a very obedient young person, don't you think?
I guess so. Yes, I'm very daring. No, I love your story. I think it's empowering. I think it's empowering for anyone at any age because I think every human probably has some moment that they've placed in their back pocket of like, why didn't I do that? Why did I do that? I
Mhm.
think that might happen too, and I think we can make amends with ourselves in a way. I don't know if we want to call it amends, but I think we could in the way
Yes.
that you did, I think that's so wonderful. I'm wondering if Leah, this version of you, could go back to the Leah right after your father died, is there anything that this version of you would want to tell her? Because you hadn't gone on all those adventures.
Frankly, if you don't mind, I'd like to take her all the way back to that 22-year-old,
I could do that.
because that's the conversation that that I've thought of lots of times.
Yeah. What would you tell her?
You do not have to be so good. You can put down your history book and just look around. History's actually happening right now. There are more, but I'm not sure it's appropriate to share them.
Would you tell her to turn in that application?
Oh, yes.
Would you?
And yes, and you know what I tell her? You are gonna be scared beyond any kind of terror you've ever felt,
Yeah.
and it's gonna be alright.
Hmm.
It's just a feeling.
You know what? Almost every person that I ask a very similar question to, they tell that younger person that it's going to be okay. And so it's really interesting that even though yours is like a different type of story that maybe I think of differently because it's not similar to my own experience, it's the same thing. We would tell this younger version of ourselves that like all the shit that we were worried about, it's going to be okay. Like we're going to be okay.
Yes.
We're going
Yes.
to make it through because that's what the human spirit does. Like you make it through, hopefully, in most cases, in a lot of cases.
Right. Yes.
Can you tell us the name of your book?
Yes. The book is called My Marriage Sabbatical, a memoir of solo travel and lasting love.
Excellent. And where can they get this book? Everywhere that books are sold?
Yes, and it's on order now, and on January 7th, it's going to be on the shelves and available
Awesome.
everywhere books are sold.
Awesome. Well, by the time this comes out, this is going to come out in early January. So as you're listening to this, make sure you check the links in the show notes so that you can access that. Also, if people want to get in your circle or connect with you or tell you their story or whatever, is that something you're into? And how could they do that?
Absolutely. Well, let me back up a moment. There are several books called Marriage Sabbatical by several authors, so you need to sort through the others if you want mine.
We will give you the link.
There you go. And my website is mymarriagesabbatical.com. There are photos from my trip, stories from the trip, and a opportunity. Actually, there's a whole section on negotiating important issues with your partner.
Oh, that's awesome. That's helpful.
Uh, yep. So, yes, I would love to hear from your viewers.
Are there contact form and stuff on there that they can reach out to you?
all the things we need are on there. Yes, and I'd love to hear from people.
Well, I would like to thank you for sharing your story in this way and answering my weird questions or whatever came up. I really appreciate you wanting to just be a part of this healing journey for me of the Life Shift podcast.
Thank you so much.
And if you are listening, thank you for listening. I love it if you stick around. If you like the show, ratings, reviews on Apple Podcasts, that's so helpful. But otherwise, I'm going to say goodbye. I'm going to say goodbye to Leah, and I will be back next week with a brand new episode of the Life Shift podcast. Thanks again, Leah.
For more information, please visit www.thelifeshiftpodcast.com.